Gullion, the land of brave Cuchulainn, defender of Ulster. Yes, we had our wars and our warriors, but we had our poets too. This sacred land, Ceantar na Nórán, the refuge of poets, McEwie, McGilladunna, O'Dorneen, Seamus Dull McCurta, and then there was the handsome Seamus McMurrochú, Rapparee. Loved his drink, and loved his women even more. It was Johnson of the Fuse who put a price on his head, and a jealous lover, Molly, who claimed the reward. The bowel Seamus swung on the gallows in Armagh jail. But money that comes that way always brings with it a curse. And so it was for Molly. Be warned. An Cailleach Beara of Gullion has spoken. You would do well to heed her words.
On her slopes the poets wrote on Johnston of the Fuse, where the story rang to a great harangue when O'Dorneen heard the news that the poet bard James Murphy was to be hung on high. By Johnston's hate and the jilted maid, on the scaffold he would die.
name is Paddy Quinn. I was born into a small farm of around 30 acres, about a mile outside the village of Leeds. When I was 9, my father died, and my mother was left to rear 8 of us on her own. I suppose times were hard, but we didn't really realise it at the time. You could say I lived a kind of sheltered life. From where I was brought up, Belfast and Derry might as well have been 1,000 miles away. I went to the local primary school in Bleaks. Then I went on to St Joseph's Secondary School in Newry. And next, I ended up in St Coleman's College. But it was while I was there that the civil rights erupted in Derry in 1968. Now, we had just got the TV the year before, 1967, an old black and white thing, hired out for about £2 a week. But on it, I seen all the images of what was happening in Derry, the rioting and so forth. And I started to question myself, what's going on here? And then, a year later, 1969, the RUC, loyalist mobs and the B-men attacked nationalist areas in Belfast, and they burnt Bombay Street to the ground. People started to flee their homes, and some of them fled across the border to makeshift camps. These people were now refugees in their own country. I remember when I was off school in the summertime, I used to work for a local farmer who lived up on very high ground in an area called Lacken. And he was supposed to pay me £1 a day. Sometimes I got the pound, sometimes I didn't. But I remember one day sitting behind a couple of bales of hay, taking a cup of tea, and it was a beautiful summer's day. And I remember watching the smoke rising out of Belfast. I remember saying to myself, what sort of a hell are these people living in? And I began to identify with these people, began to identify with them more and more. And I came to realise that these are my people. These are the people that I belong to. And I wanted to do something to help them. And I went to the first Civil Rights March in Newry. But 2 years later, or around about that, they brought in internment. And the massacre in Ballymurphy happened, and the new launch. 5 months later, came Bloody Sunday. 1 week after Bloody Sunday, there was a Civil Rights March in Newry. I went to it. There was about 100,000 people at it. To me, the civil rights movement was never stronger than it was that Sunday. But somehow, for some reason, in 1972, that movement disappeared, vanished into thin air, was gone. And my means of protest went with it.
Slave Gullion, she wears a green crown. And the moon on the mountain, the sun going down. Her ash and her alder, her green mossy boughs, and all round the mountain the wears a gold crown. And the sun going westward, the summer gone down. Her willow and her hazel, her birch and her prune, here and there round the mountain, the heather in bloom. And all around the mountain, and all the way home. Slave Gullion, she wears a white crown. There's snow in her bosom of white eider down. Her holly and her ivy, her bricks and her bars, and all round the mountain the gorse is in flower. And all around the mountain, all around the mountain, all around the mountain, and all the way home.
I arrived in Northern Ireland in 1972 and remained until 78. It was at the height of the Troubles. I was a pilot in the RAF based at headquarters in Lisburn, flying all over the province, but with a lot of work in South Armagh. Now, as an helicopter pilot, it was interesting work. I was dropping troops for road checks, flying supply missions to places like Crossmaglen and Fort Hill, generally supporting the army in whatever they wanted us to do. We were flying back into Crossmaglen late one evening. It was a long day and I was tired. My first reaction was that we had engine failure. But when the bullets started to hit the tail of the helicopter and make their way up towards the cabin, that's when I knew we were under attack. We had been hit by an RPG-7 anti-tank missile and numerous rounds of machine gun fire. Thankfully, we was able to land, evacuate the helicopter, shut it down, and get out safely. Look, I was lucky. Years later, the attacks became more sophisticated, or suppose you could say more successful. Some people might find it strange what I'm going to say, but I believe that the people who were operating in South Armagh, the IRA, were very professional. I had a high level of respect for them. I mean, they believed what they were doing was right, and at the time, I believed what I was doing was right. It was a war between the IRA and the British military. I returned here some years later to this very place. Myself and my wife, we sat over there beside Thomas Marin, who I was introduced to as a former IRA prisoner. We had a cup of tea and a chat, a long chat, a long and enjoyable chat. And later, myself and my wife, we went to the hotel in Crossmaglen and had lunch. I looked out onto the square, which I'd only ever seen from the air before, a square that I'd never walked through. When I arrived here in 1970s, I knew nothing about Northern Ireland. Nobody in England did. And if the truth be told, they still don't. But what I did discover was that you live in the most beautiful part of the world, an area of outstanding beauty, an area rich in music and folklore. I wish happiness for your children, prosperity for your people. We're neighbours. And maybe someday we can act like it.
I'm just home from a place they call the Isle of Man. None of my friends have ever been there. I went on a huge ship. Me and my mammy. My Auntie Marie lives there. She's not well. She's in bed all the time, but I was helping her get well. I took her cups of tea and read her stories from my storybook. She says to me, "Majelly, you'll be a great nurse someday." But I think I'm going to be a teacher and teach all the children. I read stories to my dog Brack. He sits on the ground and listens really, really well. And when I finish and close a book, he jumps up and runs around my feet. But I have to tell him, "No, Brack. I have to help Mammy round the house." I've just finished reading up in the kitchen. Now my Mammy's heading to Newry with my big brother Michael. She asked if I wanted to go, but I said no, as I'm going to Jesus Quay this evening with my best friend Caroline Murphy. We were there last night, but tonight we're staying over with Mrs. McGivry. We played on the beach last night until it was nearly dark, and then we had to leave. I brought Daddy back some mint sweets and a stone. I told him you'd like to see it, Daddy. When it is wet, the stone turns brown. It does. And because I brought him back some mint sweets, he brought me cornflakes in bed this morning and told me to make sure I didn't spill them over the bed. I like my daddy. I'll bring him some more sweets tomorrow. I love my Mammy too. I've just written her a note to tell her that I'm off. She already knows that I'm going, but I like to write notes and sign my name on them. I'm going to confessions over in the chapel. I don't have many sins to tell, but I did call Brack a bad name the other day when I came home from the Isle of Man. He jumped up on me, and his paws were all dirty, and my good dress got all stained. But I know he was just happy to see me home again, and I shouldn't have called him bad names. It was just bold boy, which I think isn't too bad. But I'll tell the priest anyhow. I usually get an Our Father and the 3 Holy Marys for the penance, and then you go to Holy Communion, okay, because your sins are all washed away.
Who are you that dares come to Gullion to steal my children? Don't you know I'm older than time? This land has been here long before you ever existed. From Skerriff to Drumherriff, Corlett to Carnona, Carnban to Kiltyban, Lissummon to Glasdrummun, and this land will be here long after you've departed. This is Gullion.
Mommy says we have to say our prayers before going to bed and to ask God to keep us safe. I usually kneel to say mine, but my little sister Mary, she jumps in the bed to say hers. I think that's cheating, but God will see that. I know she only does to get one of the 2 pillows for ourselves, but there's 3 of us in the bed. Me, Mary, and my baby sister Kathy. Kathy, she sleeps in the middle, and she doesn't get a pillow. Sometimes we do pillow fights, but Mommy always knows when we do. She finds feathers on the floor when she wakes up for school, and she waves her finger and says, "How many times have I told you not to do that? You're going to destroy my pillows." We have pink and orange blankets on the bed. They're warm, but itchy too, so you don't pull them up too far or they make your neck all itchy. Mary keeps stealing them blankets, and I have to pull them back. I got these pajamas from Santa for Christmas. They're warm, which is good when Mary steals the blankets. Mary has pajamas too, with white and brown rabbits on them. I like rabbits, but Daddy doesn't. He says he eats everything round the place. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night. I heard loud voices outside. They were frightening my daddy. I just hope God heard our prayer to keep us safe.
Father was involved with the SDLP, and that was a difficult place to be, particularly as children, because we were somewhat isolated in the local community because our family had a particular view on things, which was around non-violence, but very strongly based on social justice and a very humanitarian approach to things. The sense was that if you weren't within that political circle, so to speak, that you were on the outside. And it just meant that whenever there were tractors to be used for events, that it was invariably your tractor that would be taken, and it was. And we had a number of times whenever we had hijackings and tractors taken or cars taken, and I suppose that was something that you just got used to and dealt with. There were times whenever you would be afraid, and particularly one time whenever the IRA had reason to come and tell my parents that they weren't supposed to be doing something, or speaking out as they were. As children looking out in the dark and seeing masked men with guns holding our parents outside, it was a very frightening experience. That was one point where it was very frightening. After that, nothing was really, we didn't really, tractors and cars and stuff being hijacked. It was, it was way of life. But it was only whenever it came up close and personal, whenever you thought your parents were going to be killed, that's when it was frightening.
One of you is a Catholic. Out.
You are not destined to leave this world just yet, Richard. But you will carry tonight with you until the moment you draw your final breath. Leave now. Don't look back, just go. Now.
With your majestic face of the oldest of times, and your eyes like smoke, and your murmurs like rhymes, and your silver gaze, and your voice like chimes. Oh, who do they think could destroy you? With your silhouette as the sunlight dims, and your eyes where the moonlight swims. persuade you. Sad-eyed lady of the lowlands, where the sad-eyed prophet says that no man comes. Oh, here are now my blessings and my love. Should I leave them by your gate, or sad-eyed lady, should I wait?
My uncle Seamus was a likeable wee character, small of stature, unconfrontational. He was just an easy-going wee man. He never married, and I'm not even sure if he ever had anybody special in his life. But then again, you'd never know with Seamus. He could play his cards close to his chest in that regard. He lived all his life with his mother in the wee house at Thistlecross, and he adored her. He used to hand her the unopened wage packet every week. He fancied himself a bit with the mouth organ, and he could play a tune. But he was a heavy smoker, and sometimes the tune would break down into a fit of coughing. But he could sing a song. Many homes were filled with sorrow and with sadness. Many hearts were filled with anguish and with pain. That was one of his favourites. You know, I can see him now sitting in our house at Christmas time, a few whiskies in him, and belting that one out. Sure, we were only children then. He used to dress up as Santa Claus for us. We all loved playing with Seamus. In later years, he worked in the sawmill up in Ravensdale. But for a large part of his life, he worked on farms, and in particular, one farm belonging to a Protestant neighbour. Now, every field on that farm had a different name. And years later, Seamus, filled with pride, would rhyme off each and every one of those fields. But he could also turn his hand to water divining, and he dug many's a well round the country. He was a hard wee worker, was Seamus. But he was also a creature of habit, and he loved his few pints at the weekend. He'd go into Dundalk on a Saturday night, usually into the Lisdoo Arms, and he'd have some crack in there. That was his pattern. He never drove a car. But sure, he could always get a lift home with somebody else who was sitting in the bar drinking in those times. And if you were stuck, you'd just go out onto the side of the road, put your thumb out, and somebody would surely come along and give you a lift, whether they knew you or not. But depending on how well they knew you or how decent they were, they'd either drop you off at the doorstep or as close to the house that it was safe to walk the last few yards home. One night, Seamus got a lift from right outside the Lisdoo Arms, and they dropped him off just over a mile from the house. And that's where we found him the next morning, laying in a ditch.
One morning in May, as I carelessly did stray to view the green meadow and the lambs sport and play, in the clear morning dew, as I lay down to muse, a fair maiden of honour appeared in my view.
It was 1976 when the Brits came and raided our home once again. Only this time, we went up into the attic and the knocked walls down through the ceiling. And they left the house that we were born and reared in, left it that we couldn't live in it anymore. There was a new estate just after it finished in Camelot, Oliver Plunkett Park they called it. And we got a house there. So we moved to Camelot. It was there I met up with Raymond McCreesh. It wasn't too long after that we were out on an operation together. We went to this quarry, but we walked into an ambush. And the Brits started firing at us from all directions. The Brits was firing at us from high ground, and it being a very hot summer that year, they were using tracer bullets, and the grass was going on fire all around us. Me and Remy managed to get out of the quarry, and we're heading toward this house. We knew there was a car at it. 2 helicopters followed us the whole way. But when we got to the house, the owners were gone. We went into the house. The helicopter dropped down in front of the house and one behind it, and we were trapped. I can remember Remy saying to me, "What will we do? Will we fight it out?" Well, I says, "Remy, if we do, we're dead. We'll wait and see what they're going to do first. And if they're going to take us alive, then we live to fight another day." we did live to fight another day. In fact, we fought every day for the next 5 years. Only this time with no weapons. All we had was our naked bodies. And Raimi fell in that battle on the 21st of May, 1981.
O'er Dunraby wood this mountain stood, a wood that is no more. It had stretched then from Crossmaglen to Rostravor's moor and shore. But to keep the English man o' wars afloat upon the sea, they cut down all their tall oak trees, that their own oak might grow free. And not alone our tall oak, they cut down our young men, who in '98 hid on her slope, that they might rise again. But now today we're steadfast, and we're not inclined to roam. Why, we live within the shadows of our lovely mountain home.
Stephen was born with a shock of black hair and blue eyes, but they both turned to brown as he grew older. He was a normal, mischievous little boy, always on the go. As a toddler, he'd stand up in his high chair, rocking it back and forth, held in by his baby harness. He was a terrible one for disappearing when we were out and about. 3 times it happened before he started school. Each time he reappeared with a policeman, chatting away without a care in the world. As he grew up, he played with action men figures and hung plastic model airplanes he'd made from his bedroom ceiling. He always wanted to join the RAF, like his father and grandfather before him. But when the trades they offered him didn't appeal, he joined the army instead, despite knowing that I feared the worst. Still, I was also very proud of him. He came here as a soldier, to do a job he felt he had to do as a soldier. As he lay in his coffin, I gently touched his hair and said goodbye to him. I told him I was so sorry that my generation and my parents' generation had not been able to find a solution to the problem here, and that it had been allowed to drift on for so long at the cost of so many young lives, like his. The next day was his funeral and his 24th birthday. I welcomed Stephen into the world on the same day I said goodbye to him, forever. On his headstone are the words, "Turn to life and smile." And that's how I like to remember him. With a smile. I can't say that I forgive the man who shot my son. Not yet, anyhow. But I have tried to understand. I do know that if they had the chance to meet under different circumstances, they'd probably enjoyed a pint and a joke together. But history denied them that. My only hope is that a corner has been turned and that violence will never again blight this land.
I'm not alone at all, oh, they cut down our young man, who in 98 hid on her slope, that they might rise again. But now today we're steadfast, and we're not inclined to roam, while we live within the shadow of our lovely mountain.
With your majestic face of the oldest of times, and your eyes like smoke, and your murmurs like rhymes, and your gaze, and your voice like chimes. Oh, who do they think could destroy you? With your silhouette as the sunlight dims, and your eyes where the moonlight swims, and with rocks so haggard wrapped up in your limbs. Oh, how could they ever persuade you? Sad-eyed lady of the lowlands, where the sad-eyed prophet says that no man comes. Oh, here are now my blessings and my love. Should I leave them by your gate, or sad-eyed lady, should I wait?
Gullion has had its sorrows, but it also has its songs. We're a land steeped in music, dance, folklore, poetry. So I leave you with the words of one young poet, not from these parts, who in the darkness of his prison cell, his body ravaged with cold and hunger, could look to a brighter future and leave us with these immortal words. Let our revenge be the laughter of our children. So tonight, here in the shadow of majestic Gullion, let us make music, dance, and let your laughter reach the ears of Oncolliach Bera. Kyo Lewardol. Please join me.
time here, but like all of these events, there's also other people behind the scenes who are making them happen. So for their production manager, Connie Lynch, Bird. And the two other people who can't be here, Peter, who happens to be Sonia's husband. Peter came down here the other night after his day's work at the BBC as the cameraman, director of photography, and arrived here at 7 and didn't get away until after midnight, so we're sorry. So you had that after we were on his own. So because it has been filmed after 3, we're going to say thank you, Peter. So 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Peter! One other person who can't be here because she has another show tonight is on Caidach Barra, that amazing Olin Ferrari. And she will love to be here, maybe she can see the show on Tuesday night, but we'll do the same again after 3 for Olin. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Olin! I know I've been the killjoy and kept the bar closed all evening until this was over, but I thought that was a proper thing to do. But apparently the bar will be open after this, so you're very welcome to stay with us and we'll make it a session. I mean, all these projects, as I say, only work because everybody comes together and it's just raises up to what's required, and everybody did this from we started out at just after Christmas, the meeting room in Elaine's house, where our posh wine was brought out. And the formula that I got a lot of good ideas there, and thankfully we wrote them down because a lot got lost, and that was even before Blahin brought out the gin, so we as well after that. And since then it's just been a lovely journey with Vectors and everyone else. So thank you for your comments. We have 2 amazing stars here, Molly and Katie. From the word go, they've just been disciplined, they're offering ideas, suggestions, their commitment to learning, to rehearsals have just been phenomenal. And I'd like to ask Liam from the Playhouse to come up. The Playhouse runs an award certificate, usually for older people who they're working with, older like teenagers, to show a bit their commitment, their discipline, all this, but I'll let Liam speak for himself.
We have a certificate. It's usually for employment, it's usually for people that are looking to come out of school, but such was the dedication, such was the commitment, the creativity, and the sheer talent of these 2 young ladies, that Laurence has been keeping an eye on them for 5 weeks, and we have gotten 2 certificates that I hope will stand by them in years to come. I'd like to call and Molly.
So, thank you all for coming. We did films all and hopefully in the next whatever period of time, there's no money for it, but we'll get it done somehow or other, because thought it was very important that and all the work was into it, and the artists and the actors, and also great that it was important to record it. There is another show on Tuesday night. I think it's sold out at the moment at Dunkirk, but I never know there's other seats. So thanks again, and say hopefully stay around and have a chat. I know you can take out your cameras again and get photos with all the actors and stars. Thanks again.
Dublin Academy. The idea behind that is to hear all the story from all sides. And what we find as we go, we're hearing stories from Protestant loyalist lost, Republican Catholic lost, state forces lost, and the tragedy and the wounds unite us all. And this project is about letting those voices be heard and to fill those wounds up with the stories of loss so that we can move forward together. Because it's a funded project, I have a bit of a boring thing to ask you. There's forums outside. The funders like these sorts of things, and it enables us to keep this sort of thing going. And I would very much appreciate you just taking a moment as you go. As you go outside, you'll see there's papers and pens. I'll go outside with the yellow box just when you finish it, throw them in, just take a minute. And again, thank you so much. Before we go, I'd like one last round of applause for Laurence McKeown.